Do you like tile placement, worker placement, hand management, resource management, variable scoring tracks, and most importantly, Candyland? If you answered yes, then stick right here because I'm about to give you 3 reasons why I think I love Sweetlands and 1 reason, or I guess thing, I would actually change about the game. Sweetlands is on Kickstarter right now. It's Uchibacoya's newest project and is completely different than anything else that they've at least recently done. Known for the likes of Ostia and Aqua Garden. In fact, those are the games that I know them from. I actually haven't played them, but I've admired them from afar. They're hard to come by in the States unless you actually back them. They both have been on a trade list for quite a while for me on BGG, yet nobody wants to trade those games, which says something. They are well known for their production, beautiful meeples, especially the Aqua Garden ones. I can't get over those. Those things are absolutely insane. But Sweetlands, from what I can gather, is a completely different game at a completely different weight class than they've ever developed in before. Now, admittedly, I'm a little late to the game here. I'm in the middle of the campaign, but Uchibacoya reached out to me and asked if I'd like to do a little mid-campaign coverage. And in fact, I said this on my last video, which was yet another preview video. I don't like doing previews. However, I've done 2 previews in a row now with this, but I just couldn't pass up the opportunity to play this thing. And especially because, you know, Uchibacoya games have sort of been a white whale for me. So given the opportunity, I'm going to grind this out and try to get this done in the middle of the campaign. With all that said, this might not be as in-depth as I typically do in a game. I've got 4 games in on this right this second, but I know enough to give you a pretty solid overview on some of the mechanics and what I really love about them. And without further ado, these are the 3 reasons why I might just love this game. First and foremost, it's the cards. Everything you do in this game revolves around cards. You draw 5 new cards each and every turn, unless of course you've gotten some form of bonus, which you can draw up to 7. And really what you're doing on your turn is taking actions using these cards. You can either play the card and pay the cost, or you can pay the card to activate an action on this kind of shared action board. In fact, that's the only real interaction that happens in this game is in that little action space in the middle of the shared board. That's an aside, but thought I'd point that out. This is very low interaction, very high multiplayer solitaire here. The crunchiness comes in, I guess, the anatomy of the card. Let's take a look at one of these cards right now, and that will help me kind of demonstrate the importance of why these cards are so special. First and foremost, let's take a look at Alex Amber. They all have interesting different names. A lot of them are related to sweet treats. I guess there's like Vincent Very Berry, and what is this? Madame Macron, Ernest Elderberry. I guess I don't know what Alex Amber is, but I just picked that one and that's what we're gonna go with. So there's the name of the card, of course, has nothing to do with really anything else other than kind of thematically integrating them into this candy town city building game, which we're going to get to all of that. Don't worry. There's a cost in gold or coins at the top. In this case, it's 7. Then that middle rectangle is an immediate action that you take when you pay the cost of the card. And in this case, Alex Amber once paid, and then you take the particular action, which for every wheat you have, you get 2 coins. The card is done. However, there are these little sweet tags. They act in the same way that a couple recent games that I've reviewed have used them in Creature Caravan and Wondrous Creatures, 2 wonderful games, by the way. Go watch those videos if you haven't yet. But they are tags that are used in other cards. Some of those tags will give discounts on other cards. Some of them will have an effect that is multiplied by the number of the tags that you have. We'll take Diana Dragon Fruit, for example. The second effect on this immediate action is for one of each of those symbols. I guess one's white cake. I have no idea what this other symbol is. You get to build a road. Those are all over these cards, so these secondary sweet tags are important. However, there's one more thing that these cards do. Taking a look still at Diana Dragon Fruit, there's another action at the bottom of the card that you cannot resolve yet, at least. If you spend a diamond, you can, what I think is called automate the card. Basically, it makes you tuck them into a board. And when you activate this symbol, which you can through various ways in this game, you get to activate all of the automation effects in cards that are tucked below your board. You might also play a card like the aforementioned Ernest Elderberry and you get a pass effect. So each time you pass your turn, so there's 5 rounds in this game, every time you pass, you get to activate that effect. So that's something that's ongoing. The multi-use nature of these cards is something I generally love. It's not necessarily novel in games. Now, the combination of all of these things is very much novel. However, you've seen this before, but I just love that on multiple levels, right? You can use the card just to pay to take kind of these communal actions that you will be doing quite a bit, but then you're taking into account the effects that you can trigger right then. You're taking into account if they're pass effects, how many rounds are left. You're also taking into account, do I have diamonds? Should I go get diamonds before I play this thing? Because I want to put it in that automation slot and automate sometime down the line to get more and more stuff. And then on top of that, you're taking into account all of these sweet tags. There is a ton of crunch in something as simple as go play the cards in your hand. And that's all you're doing. In every round but the last, you're playing every card but one. You can only hold one. That is essentially a hand limit going into the next round before you draw 5 more cards. The card play is extremely crunchy. There is a little bit of a drawback, but I'll get to that because my critique is related to these cards, but there's a lot more really great stuff to talk about in this game. You might also ask yourself, why on earth am I playing all of these cards? Looking at everything else in this game can feel incredibly overwhelming. There is a lot. This is insane table hog. You have your own personal map or terrain board or town board, or I don't even know what it's called, but the hex board that you're building this town out on. You have your own personal board that has all these different buildings and gizmos and gadgets and resource management components on it. Then there's another board that goes on top of your board that has more tracks on it. Then there's the centralized board that has all of the actions. Then you have all these other skill tiles on there. It's a lot. And frankly, when I first started learning this game, I looked at it and I was overwhelmed. However, once I realized it was just playing the cards in my hand and just making efficiency decisions, everything calmed down a little bit. And I don't want to overwhelm with all of these other boards because everything that you're doing, all the actions you're taking are basically in the pursuit of something on your personal map. This map board reminds me a little bit of Castles of Burgundy. I mean, that's really where the comparisons stop, but it is your own hex-based map board that you're trying to build a city on. There's color-coded hexes on there, and they are related to a specific type of tile. That tile is related to resources on your board. Generally, I think the theme of this is King Candy, or I get maybe King Candy's Candyland. Anyways, the ruler of this sweet land is become sick from eating too much candy, and you're trying to prove yourself as a city builder. You're trying to, what is essentially terraform or place these terrain tiles all across the map. You're trying to build routes in order to flip these tiles that then either give you more of a resource production or better ability to score on objectives. That's one of the really wonderful, crunchy decisions as you're placing these tiles, deciding which one to place if it's not given specifically to you which one to place, because there's all kinds of different effects in this game. Each of them are related to that resource type, and maybe you need a specific resource type to do a particular thing. I mean, this game is really a hand management, resource management game when it really comes down to it. There's ironwood and wheat that corresponds to these hexes. There's also a water hex that corresponds to your gold production. Like I mentioned, as you place these hexes out on the board, you're also needing to go and build roads. Those roads just kind of meander their way throughout these hexes, and as they're adjacent to the hexes, they flip, like I said. That interesting decision is, of course, you want production. However, you want to actually score points. That's when this middle board comes into play. And there are prosperity tracks. Those prosperity tracks are related to the different terrain types. You can choose to activate that particular terrain to go up on the prosperity track. Really, they're just endgame goals on stuff that you're already doing. Like building roads, like putting down these hexes, like building buildings, which we'll get to in just a second, playing the cards, which we've already talked about, playing cookie rabbits. Yeah, there's cookie rabbits. We'll get to that in a little bit. And also going up on an industry track, which is yet another track to go up on. They like tracks in this game, if you haven't gotten that already. Another kind of calculation you're doing as you're placing these hex tiles, there's bonuses all over the map that you are trying to strive to and build to. The other goals that you have as you're building out are to reach these ports, because if you don't reach all of the ports, it's going to be negative points at the end of the game. You actually, if you reach all of them, you get positive points, but you can score, I believe, up to negative 40 points, which is really significant if you don't reach any of the ports. On top of that, if you reach and build a road adjacent to one of these extra card symbols, you get extra card draw. This reminds me a little bit of Underwater Cities and its personal route building board. There's some other similarities there as well. So by the way, if you like Underwater Cities, you might like this game. Also Gaia Project as well. If you're a Gaia Project fan, or I guess any of the Terra Mysticas, you'll probably see a lot of DNA in here. On top of extra stuff. But yeah, that's your goal in building those out. I had mentioned the buildings. So the buildings are important, and I guess it's like 3 different ways. I mean, building buildings contribute to those prosperity track goals. They also give you immediate resources or bonuses as you actually build them. But what you're trying to do is build individual groups of different types of buildings, because in between each round you score points based upon those cities. You also want to build enough hex tiles or place enough hex tiles that you can get far enough out to build more cities on top. And also when you build the buildings, you actually get to reactivate the flip ability of the particular hex tile. That's important because you are making really tough decisions on, do I need more resource production, which by the way happens at the end of every round, or do I need to go up on those prosperity tracks to actually score points? Because at the end of the day, you're trying to score points. There's different types of buildings throughout your board. All of them have different aspects to them. There's this milk building that's blocking your progression on an industry track. It's a track that you go up on to get more and more stuff. There's also coffee buildings that once built will actually activate the row of cards you have beneath it, those automation cards that we had talked about earlier. And then there's kind of the core buildings that are on your board that you're building from top to bottom. They're increasingly getting more expensive, but also giving you really great stuff to help spur forward these turns that can become completely enormous, which brings me to the third thing that I absolutely love about this game. It's the combos. Who doesn't love combos? Now, with that said, the combo potential leads to a ton of AP. This is a very AP prone game. The good news is, with such little player interaction, once people have selected their action and kind of blocked the spot, the only place that you actually interact, the next player can take their turn. By the way, you get bonuses when you place terrain tile. You get bonuses when you place a road. You get bonuses when you build a building. You get bonuses when you move up a prosperity track. You get bonuses when you move up an industry track. You get bonuses if you place a cookie rabbit, which that's populating your city, by the way. It's yet another track that you have to go up in order to have the privilege to build a cookie rabbit, by the way. But when you build a cookie rabbit and there's something underneath it, you actually, I guess it's not build a cookie rabbit, by the way. It's placing a cookie rabbit. I think they're living in your sweet lands city. When you run the automation, you get all of the bonuses on those cards that you've played. The sweet tag interactions on the cards that you've played, interacting with other cards, feels like a ton of bonuses because they often multiply the effect of the card. And then I hadn't even mentioned, you can get these skill tiles, which actually are kind of like Gaia Project as well, that you can continue to use. Maybe they give you a persistent points per building after they build. They have flip abilities that just give you stuff each and every round. Some of them have scoring and some of them have one-time effects, but it all feels like a bonus. So basically everything you're doing in this game, you're either getting a bonus for or you're making progress on a track towards your next bonus. Some people don't really love this point salad, combo-tastic, getting bonuses everywhere approach to a game. And I will say, I get it. And if you don't, this is probably not the game for you. But others really love to look at what sometimes feels like 5 to 10 possibilities and trying to count the resources you'll get if you do one thing, and you're the progression or the order in which you're playing these cards and getting the resources or bumping your production or going up a track that will give you another resource that may parlay into you being able to take another action. It's absolutely insane. With all of that said, though, it's not a game that does it for you. It's not a game that's just automatically propelling you towards the finish line. Early on in the first couple of games, I found myself constantly blocked by not having the right resources at the right time, not knowing what production to kind of focus in on, not having the resources to even take the action on that communal board, certainly not having the money to play all of the cards. There is a lot of knowledge needed to make this game efficient. But once you get there, it really starts to hum, and you can have these turns that feel incredible. You also have rounds that you just can't do a whole lot. Many of the action spaces actually cost resources to perform the thing. Some of them are free, but those also will fill up fairly quickly from a competitor. To build anything, it costs resources, and your gold is another thing that you have to build production up on, and a lot of cards that you get in your hand can be awfully expensive. So if you're not skillful, this game isn't just handing you stuff. I think about a totally different game, but the concept of a game handing you everything, to me, I felt that way in Earth. I felt like no matter what I did with Earth, I was getting bonuses. I was getting extra stuff. It was just more and more and more. I felt like I was dumb lucking my way into it. The possibility is there, but it's not given. You have to have some skill, but you do have to have some luck, which that brings me to, I guess, what is the critique, but I think it can be easily fixed. I had the same exact critique with Creature Caravan. There is a giant stack of cards here. Tons of cards. I don't know how many this game will actually end up coming out with. This is, once again, this is a prototype copy here, but there are a ton of possibilities. And some of these cards are really cheap to play. Some of these cards are incredibly expensive relative to where your production starts. So if you draw a bunch of really expensive cards, especially early game, you can't play them. Vice versa, if you draw a bunch of really great cards, and maybe they're cards that are related to those sweet tags, those little icons, and you want to play a couple to gather a couple of those icons before you play maybe that third one that gives you a bonus based upon the number of those icons that you actually have, but you just don't have enough money to play them all. The tricky part is you have to discard everything in your hand that's above one card at the end of each round. The first thing I'd fix is I'd say there is no hand limit at the end of a round. If you want to pass early and keep as many cards as you can in your hand and then draw your 5, go ahead and do it. Passing first is already a strategic decision. First of all, it gives you the first player token, so you get to play the first turn, getting a chance at those coveted action spots in the middle of that kind of communal board. On top of that, it allows you to place your round aid token on any spot you'd want. We haven't mentioned round aid, but it's a way to get bonuses and give somebody who passes first the priority to which bonuses they want. This is actually really similar to Gaia Project as well. So it's already a strategic decision. So why not let me keep as many cards in my hand and rush to the end and be able to do that while giving somebody else the free reign on the board to do whatever they want? That is a really interesting push-pull. It also would allow me to save up. If I have 3 cards that all deal with that white cake symbol as an example, but I can't possibly play them all, and then I have to chuck them or use them just to take the generic actions in the middle of the board, I'm losing out on, and it's such an insanely bad feeling moment if I have this great combo sitting in my hand. The other thing I would do is I'd create a secondary card market. I had the same feedback for Creature Caravan. Maybe it's a house rule on all these, by the way. Put 5 cards out on the market, add an action to be able to cherry pick those cards, refill that market. It allows you to have some form of agency on what cards you're getting into your hand and possibly building a strategy. The third option is actually augmenting what is already in the game. There is a variant that allows you to draft your hand. Everyone draws 6 cards, you take a card and pass it around. I absolutely love this, but it has you start the game with it. I would actually like to try this out each and every round. Draw 6 cards, pass them around, do the draft, and get cards in your hand that you are actually choosing that you might be able to actually use this next round. The one downfall to this one, and it's probably why it's not in the game, is that it would add time. It would add AP in already an AP prone game. With that said, I think it might be worth it. With so many cards and so much variability, which by the way is a good thing. It's giving you variability on the game, especially in what amounts to a multiplayer solitaire game. You want that variability. When there's not a dynamic game state that you're constantly reacting to, you need that level of variability. And I'm incredibly thankful that there are so many cards. With that said, nothing's predictable, and you could get what amounts to a hand that you literally cannot play any cards just because your money production or your gold production is so low. This is a very small quibble and something I can house rule very easily if I find it to be a problem. This game is right up my alley. I think that really, if you've made it this far, it's probably sounding good, or maybe you've watched other videos on it. Really, I would kind of ask myself, do I enjoy the aesthetic? And if you are here, you probably do. It's probably, the aesthetic probably interests you enough. The theme comes through, you know, but it's a Euro at the end of the day. It's a point salad, resource management, hand management, multi-use cards, network building, super crunchy, grindy efficiency puzzle. If you like that stuff, I mean, this is the game for you, I think, or possibly. I don't kind of blindly say like, oh, go get stuff. But with Uchibacoya, I found it's incredibly hard to find this stuff in the secondhand market later on. Very, very expensive. Just look up some of their other games. Take a look at Aqua Garden and its price right now. It probably would be worth it to give it a try. Last time I checked, the shipping, at least to the US, seemed incredibly reasonable on top of that. So for me, it's a back. It's a clear back. This is right up my alley. This is that crunchy puzzle that is not likely to get old anytime soon. And by the way, there's a lot more to it. I did not go over every single aspect like I typically do. I wanted to try to keep this short and sweet. I really frankly need like another 10 plays with this, but I was so excited. I had to tell you about it before the campaign ended. And by the way, this is not sponsored, not paid whatsoever. I'm sending this copy away. I have no obligation to say any of this stuff. It's just legitimately kind of a wonderful game, at least through the few plays I've had. And if you've made it this far, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Have yourself a great day.